So I hear it from my grandma and what my grandpa had to go through, being able to survive that, come to a brand new place, like super like unknown to them. It's scary, but they did it. They survived, and we're all here. And it's like just being grateful for that.
All right, so Andrew, I've heard your stories as to how you and Colby decided to start your guys' podcast, Uncut
Uh huh.
Hawaii. But what I wanted to know is like, for you spending a good chunk of your career has been, capturing other people's stories and such and in your video work and such. What was it that was attractive to you that you said, yes, I want to do this? And it's a lot of work, so you really committed to it.
Yeah, yeah, no, it is. And it's crazy. It's been 2 years now.
Dang,
So,
really? Wow.
yeah, so
Feels like
fast,
just
right? So,
yesterday. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, bottom line is we're storytellers.
Hmm.
And then two, we love to talk story. So it was like kind of like a, hey, podcasts were starting to get popular. We listen to a lot of podcasts. Why don't we try and do our own, right?
Yeah.
Because the whole reason behind the two was as storytellers, being behind the camera, we're usually working for a client that has like a
Hmm.
time limit, right? Like, or a deliverable that's like, hey, you know, we're going to send you out for this interview, but we need you to cut down these interviews and create like a 2 minute piece. It's
Hmm.
like, all right, well, what are we going to do with the rest of the 20-minute interview,
Right.
So there was so much gold in those sound bites that like no one would ever see because it would just sit on our hard drives. So we were like, okay, how do we find a way to share these stories kind of raw and just like talk story style? And we were just like, let's just try and start a podcast. So the I think the most attractive thing to answer your question was being able to share the story in its entirety and not having
Hmm.
to cut it to like a certain time limit.
Yeah. What is it about storytelling in general, like not just the podcast, but what got you into your career? What you said you're a storyteller. What what was that I guess attraction or draw to
Uh-huh.
committing your life to being a storyteller?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, I think a lot of people know by now, but I was a pre-med major. I studied bio. I was going into the medicine field, and I don't know. There were a lot of things about that like I think bottom line I wanted to be able to like help people,
Mm.
um, and that was like a different capacity. And it wasn't until I talked to a couple mentors like Kobe being one of them, or even like other friends in the industry, and it's like you know you in a way, storytelling is helping people, but just in a different way. You're not helping them medically, but telling someone's story is going to help, whoever's watching on the other side. Like they may connect and it may inspire them to do something, or it may change their lives. They might be in a position and they hear the story and it just changes their lives. So that's one aspect of it. Um, and then I think the other very, intriguing thing about storytelling to me is everybody has a story,
Hmm.
and I kind of learned that going through like my broadcast journalism class in high school. Shout out to Monalua, Mrs.
Yeah.
Surioka. Um, she really, it was really drilled that like, hey, everybody has a story, and whether when you're talking to someone, it might be surface level, but if you keep talking to them and you dig a little bit deeper, there's more to every story as well. So there's so many levels to it and so many layers, and that's what excites me.
Yeah. You said you were a pre-med major. When I assume that you've let that dream
Yeah.
go.
Yes.
How did your
So
parents feel about that?
yeah, no, it's crazy. Everyone asks that, but it was never my parents. I don't think they were actually surprised that it took me that long to realize that I didn't want to be a doctor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when I told my parents, they're like, "Oh my god, thank goodness!" Like,
Wow, you're the best parents ever. The
no, what's
best Asian
crazy?
parents.
Yes, yes. So it was never like, they've always been very supportive of what I wanted to do. And I mean, so they're immigrants, and I was born here. And so I'm first generation. And so I experienced that, like coming from Vietnam and that type of country. You come over to a brand new place, you uproot your whole life, and you work so hard and you're like hustling. Like they almost didn't have the luxury of chasing their dreams.
Mm,
And so
yeah.
all they did was just work hard, like hustle, and make sure we had good lives, and or even just like make it through life, and bring
Hmm.
food to the table and just like work hard. That's all they know. And so I think when it came to their first child, I'm the oldest, and then my sisters as well, it was very, in a sense where do whatever makes you happy. And we want to be able to do whatever it takes for you guys to live your dream and enjoy yourselves, and not have to, I wouldn't say not have to work hard, but I think chasing your dreams and really like doing something you're passionate about.
That's so interesting because it's so often that we hear similar stories, but the
Yep.
parents, instead of taking the approach that your parents did, they go, "Hey, we went and suffered, so you should feel this. Like you got to do the same. Like this is the only
Uh-huh.
way we know how, and
Yeah.
if you're not suffering, that means you're not trying hard enough, kind of thing."
Oh, 100%. I think there was still like that aspect of it.
Yeah,
Because it's like all they know, right? Like,
yeah.
you talk about like the Asian childhood traumas and it's all there. I'm still dealing with it. Um and I love my family, I love my parents, I love how I was raised. It really like gave me that grit to like make me who I am today. And I really owe it to my parents and the childhood that I did grow up in because um like I said in a metaphorically sense, but like it really forces you to be hungry, like and
Mm,
want the next thing and work hard to do the next thing. But I think the cool part about it is I'm working hard and in industry that I love and doing
yeah.
something that I'm like super passionate about. So it never really feels like work. It's cliche, but it's so true.
What did your parents do for a living, and how did
Yeah.
they know to share this, um, I guess, life advice of pursue your passions and your dreams? Because I think that's sometimes a foreign concept to parents. It's like you
Oh,
do that
100%.
when you're successful, but in the beginning, just work hard at whatever junk job you can get in so that
Yeah, yeah.
you can afford to
100%.
chase your dreams. Yeah.
100%. I think well, my dad did like photo video work
Oh,
in Vietnam. His brothers
oh,
did it. They still do it in Vietnam.
no
And so
way.
they're all creative. Like my dad grew up in a family of artists. Everyone painted, like they had some kind
Wow.
of talent. Singing. My dad's into music. My mom is the chef, right? She cooks. She's amazing at it. I love her food. I think about it every day. Um and so when they moved to Hawaii, um it was just natural for them to go into, I think, like the food industry. So
Hmm.
they had a restaurant, they had a lunch wagon, and my parents would just work hard at that. And like so my
Yeah.
dad kind of put like his passion to the side, right? But then
Mm,
growing up he still found ways to do it.
yeah.
And so that's what I valued in like the entrepreneurship life. And because I grew up around them, they were business owners. It was hard work, but I think the big thing for me was they were home when I was home. And like
Wow.
I live like it was us, my grandparents, my parents. And so like when they were at work, like my grandparents would be really involved. But for the most part, like they were always home during the because they could set their own hours and whatnot, right? And
Yeah.
so that's where I first experienced like that kind of like freedom, not freedom, but like that kind of like flexibility,
Yeah.
not having to work for someone. And so seeing that, and then also seeing how my dad would make time for his passion, right? Like so like he would do wedding videos.
Oh.
And so he really tapped into the Vietnamese market here, wedding videos. I grew up around that. I grew up like, what you call capturing the tape in real time. It was crazy. And
So
then
what does that look like?
so like my dad would film the wedding, come home
Yeah.
with like all these tapes. And then back then it's not like now where you just copy it into a hard drive. It's like you had to put it into a player like a VCR, record like live captured into your software real time. So if the video was 30 minutes, it would take 30 minutes to transfer
Wow.
into the computer. And so that's what I grew up like. I have photos of me kind of just hanging out with headphones, like
Whoa.
capturing those videos. So that's where I think I first developed like the passion for like filmmaking and
Yeah.
the storytelling and the weddings.
Hmm.
And then he also went into like producing like Vietnamese news here. So he did like a
Whoa.
network in Hawaii, like telling Vietnamese news and stuff. So I was really surrounded by all of that. And then my mom always in the kitchen, just loved doing that. So seeing that and how they operated was really inspiring.
That's so unique because a lot of families that grow up owning and running restaurants,
Yeah,
it's like they never have time for family because they're just 7 days a week,
yeah,
365 days a week, all day, all night. So it's really awesome that your parents still figured out ways to prioritize being there
yeah.
for you guys and family. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, I really, really value that. And so when it was time for me to make that decision if I wanted to pursue medicine or not, it was actually when I won an Emmy in 2017 for like a show I produced. And basically that was kind of like the turning point, was like, I'm gonna take this as a sign from God, like, this is like what I'm meant to do. School will always be there. Like if all fails, I can go back and go to school at whatever
Hmm.
age, right? School will always be there. Um, but failure was not an option. So, uh, and then I kind of just sat down with Megan, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, and kind of talked through my values and what I really wanted to do. And high up there, like the top thing was family time. I really
Mm.
valued like the flexibility of time. As you get older, like you value time so much. So I value
Hmm.
time a lot. It's so valuable. It's something you can't create. It's the most expensive way to do or pay for anything. So
Yeah.
I really value time, and so just ways to make time. And when I thought about the values, I was like, being a doctor is not going to be it.
Hmm.
I will be so busy in the hospital or wherever I'm working in my practice, and cool, it's a cool job. You're a doctor and whatnot, but just like what I value really went back
Yeah.
to that.
You're saying that, you wanted to help people, and that's initially
Yeah.
why you got into medicine, and then you figured out through video and getting people stories, that's how you help. Where did this desire to want to help people come from? Because not a lot of, especially young people, like that's not the first thing we think of. It's like,
Yeah. I
get the
think I
fancy
think it's
car or whatever.
yeah, I really owe it to my grandparents. Growing up with
Oh.
them like in the house,
Hmm.
it's just like a different environment. So super grateful for um the opportunity to grow up with my parents, my grandparents and my parents, and just their love and whatnot. So basically growing up, my grandparents being immigrants, didn't speak a lot of English.
Hmm.
So I would help them translate and whatnot. And then, they're older, we would take them to the doctor's office and whatnot. So I would be translating for them, taking them to these appointments. And um, that's where I fell in love with medicine. Just seeing
Hmm.
how these doctors change my grandma's like perspective about something, or just like, how she was feeling.
Yeah.
That really intrigued me. And like I was like, oh man, I want to be a doctor. I want to help like people like feel better physically, mentally, all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
And so growing up with that, I wanted to be able to make other people feel the way I felt. So that's
Hmm.
like my desire to help people. And then so that's why I was so set on being a doctor, nothing else. And then yeah, once I realized like I can do the same and I can help people in a different capacity through storytelling or through filmmaking or through like, growing businesses and growing teams and operating that way, like, that changed my whole perspective on everything.
Yeah. Why did your family initially decide to move from Vietnam to Hawaii? Why did they choose Hawaii?
Yeah, so my grandpa was in the war. He was a soldier fighting for the US Army during the war, and he was like a prisoner of war. And then like after he got out, the US offered to bring my family over to the United States. So actually my parents and my grandparents ended up all the way in New Jersey first. So the
No way.
farthest point,
Wow.
and then it was way too cold.
Yeah.
So they made their way back. They ended up in like San Francisco area, California. Still too cold, and then all the way back up in Hawaii, and it was like very similar climate, weather, the people. So and then they settled here in '89, and I was born in '93, and we've been here
Holy
since. Yeah,
smokes.
so very very recent. I feel like.
Yeah. Like as you're telling this, I'm just thinking it's like way back in the 60s or
No,
70s, but
yeah, yeah.
I was
So
9 years old when you were born. I didn't realize you're so much younger than me. Now I feel ancient.
No, no, no. But yeah, so yeah, we've been here ever since. It's hard to leave.
So, for your grandfather who was serving for the U.S. in the war, was that the Vietnam War?
Yep, the Vietnam War.
W- did he ever share with you? his experiences, or why he chose to fight on the U.S. side?
See, so this is like a huge thing, right? Like you always hear like, oh, it's you should like talk to your grandparents, like tell their stories, and
Yeah.
you know, me being a storyteller, like yes, of course, I really want to, but I haven't had. I mean, like I've talked to him, but I think it's like
Yeah.
a one of those like sensitive topics.
Yeah.
So I haven't really had a chance to deep dive in. My grandma passed, but I was able to like hear some stories from her, but like nothing directly from my grandpa yet. So he's like,
Interesting.
it's crazy, but he like wrote everything out.
Oh.
So he did write all of his stories out in Vietnamese. It's sitting at home in like this big drawer that we have. So it's there, but like he I think he almost wanted to like protect us from it. Like that's the vibe I got like growing up,
Mm,
because I was always
yeah.
curious too,
Yeah.
but like it was almost like he was like protecting us. I know I'm sure it was like crazy stories, like war stories. Like I can't imagine. So yeah,
Yeah.
I I,
Did
I think it is a goal to like still get that somehow though.
have so and you've never read the stories that he wrote out yet?
I have not.
Is that because you are waiting to try, you rather hear it from him directly, or
Yeah, I think it's just like growing up, it was almost again like that sense of like it was like forbidden, like restricted,
uh
like don't talk about it. I'm definitely curious. Like he wrote it out. Like obviously someone's gonna read it. I think
yeah.
my dad has read it already, and like I I I should read it, but like I kind of want to hear it from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So after my grandma passed, he moved to Texas. So it's
Oh
been a
wow.
little bit harder on like I don't see him as often, but I
Yeah.
do see him. I will see him soon. So maybe I'll bring it up,
Yeah.
see how it goes.
Did he and your grandmother ever kind of instill, like, maybe not from the war, but lessons or values that they brought with them, as far as knowing what the experience was like living in another country, and the journey to the life that you knew? Because
Oh, 100%.
yeah.
I think that's a good question. I mean, everybody like always teases me about this, but my two favorite words are like grateful and stoked. So like a lot
Why
of
are
my
they
like
teasing
writing,
you?
I know. I mean, not teasing, just because I use it so often. Like everything, I'm like, I'm so grateful for this, or I'm stoked for this, or like they would be in the same sentence. And so it's like, I think my sense of gratitude really came from them, and just like being grateful for what you have, because it's like, everybody's lives are different, and just having an opportunity to be alive, and because I'm sure the war was intense. I hear it from my grandma and what my grandpa had to go through, and being able to survive that, come to a brand new place, like super like unknown to them, again like uprooting their lives. It's scary, but they did it. They survived, and we're all here. And it's like just being grateful for that, and then also understanding like your roots, knowing your roots, and being grateful for that as well. So your ancestors were very cultured in the Vietnamese like tradition,
Hmm.
and so always honoring the ancestors and being grateful for everything that you have. So really those things, um, yeah. So I'm very grateful about everything. I if you like look at my captions, or whenever I write something, like the word
Yeah.
grateful is always in there. Stoked. I'm super stoked about life.
Dude,
But yeah.
I think so many people would love to have that feeling all bottled up somehow. Because if we could all have that shared emotion about
Yeah.
life, like, oh, we'd enjoy life so much more. You figured it.
Exactly, exactly. I think more people need just to be stoked about life, and
Yeah.
just be grateful for what they have.
Was there any particular story that kind of stood out to you, that was meaningful to you, that your grandmother shared about your grandfather, that when you, because you said that it gave you this sense of like, wow, got to really appreciate what we have here because of what they went through? Like, was there anything that she shared where you're like, wow, this really opens my eyes to how blessed I am
Yeah,
here?
even just like my dad sharing stories and stuff, like they
Mm,
grew up like poor in Vietnam.
Mm.
Like they would go starving for a few days, or like my grandma would have to walk like miles to like, she would make like these rice things, and like she would walk miles carrying it, like selling it, and then like come back with like very little, like they would trade for like rice, or I don't know
Wow.
what it is, but like, or bread even, and my dad would be so stoked to just like be able to eat like a small piece of bread because they grew up in a family with like 7 siblings. So it
Oh,
was
wow.
like
Yeah.
them and whatnot, and my grandpa being away at war, and I don't know, it was just like those types of stories, just like
Yeah.
wow, like like we never experienced that. So it's like I can't even
Mhm.
imagine. And like you hear it and you hear how intense it is, but like again, like you never lived it. So it's like
Yeah.
even with the war stories and all that, like that was one. And then when I was 14, we got to go back to my dad's childhood home, actually,
Oh, wow.
which is crazy. Like in
Yeah.
the country, someone else lived there already, whatnot, but everything was like kind of very similar. We got to visit, and then we walked out into the fields, and then there was like a door, like a door in the ground to like an underground like basement dungeon area.
Wow.
And then my dad like kind of like got emotional, and he was like, oh, I remember, like my dad was young, but like my uncles were like older, so they realized. And it was like this, like there was a time when like the communist soldiers came in and like were shooting at the house and whatnot, so they all ran to this
Wow.
basement door, hid underground, but my grandpa stayed up to try and like protect them. So that was one. And then like they could hear like my grandpa getting shot at, and like my their family hiding under, I don't know, just very intense.
Yeah.
And I've actually, that's crazy, I've never actually talked about this with anyone, so just like thinking about it again is like making me feel all emotional too. But yeah,
Yeah.
just like remembering that moment, seeing the whole thing, and just like again, like just imagining, you see all the old footage, you see the movies and whatnot, and I just can't imagine like being there and like
Yeah.
experiencing it. And luckily my grandpa survived, everything was all good, and whatnot. But yeah, it could have been wild.
I can see why he might feel that he doesn't want to share these things.
Yeah,
It's a life that you don't want to go back to, because that's why he
exactly.
fought so hard to get to you
Yeah,
to where you are now. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I can see it too, like like
Yeah.
it definitely, like he, so we're also religious, right? So he like prays every night, and like I can like he also has like almost like affirmations, or like these things. No one's ever read it, so I'm always curious. Like I'm very
Oh.
curious. It's in his wallet. He always pulls it out and he reads it all the time, and he always like prays, or like he mumbles things in it like to himself, and I'm just like, oh, I wonder what he's like talking about. But I think it's like all stuff from like back then, which is like
Uh,
intense.
I I I can see why, going through that it kind of passed down through the generations to you, of where it ends up where you have the values of spending family time and committing to family is the number one priority for you. Because you look at the extreme of all of that time that they had to be separated from each other and not even knowing
Yep.
when they might see each other again, to have this opportunity now, this life where you can choose to prioritize family time. I mean, that's really deep.
Yeah. Growing up, it was all about family. It's still all about family. And so, with the two younger sisters that I have, my parents, my grandparents, we were like a tight unit. And, as we got older, like I moved out of the house. My sister's in school in Missouri. My middle sister's still living at home, but like we're not like all together now. But, the biggest thing I realized as an adult is there comes a time where you go off and you start your own unit and you
Hmm.
create your own family. And so that was kind of like a tough thing for me at first because I was so tight with my family. I still deal with it sometimes, it could be like a childhood trauma thing or whatever it is, but I I'm so attached to my family, both families, and so it's like sometimes it's hard to make decisions and whatnot. But I really value family, and now I'm in the phase of my life where I'm navigating. Okay, I have a daughter now, 6 months
Hmm.
old. How do I be the best version of myself, and how do I raise this family unit, my family unit now, mine and Megan's, and how do we kind of just live life to the best, and I don't know, yeah, just be happy.
Yeah. When it comes to having all of these deep-seated roots in Vietnam and the culture and such, being here in Hawaii, it's sometimes can be difficult because there's so many different cultures and we have our own kind of like idea of
Yeah.
like local. Um, how much do you feel, kind of an obligation or maybe a desire to really keep a lot of maybe some of the Vietnamese culture um, that your grandparents and your parents have kind of passed on to you, and then now maybe passing it on to your daughter? Or is it more of a feeling of, hey, that's their thing, this current, way of culture that I have experienced, that's the one I want to
Yeah, no,
live?
I feel that, and it's always like everybody's has their own personal preference, and for us, for me, it's very important to continue the traditions
Hmm.
and really instill that in all of the generations to come, right? But I think there's a way to hand it, or like to a level, right? Like there's a balance, because it's like they know nothing else than like the Vietnamese culture, because it's all they
Oh,
grew
yeah,
up
yeah.
with, the intensity of that, versus like moving to America, there's a melting pot of cultures and whatnot. Yes, I want to stay true to the Vietnamese traditions and cultures, but I married a Japanese. Um, I have a Japanese wife, Megan, and so like I want to instill her cultures in there too. So it's like it's
Mm,
gonna be different. There's gonna be like a lot of like balancing, but yes, I definitely want to carry on the traditions and instill that, because I think traditions are important, and then like honoring your ancestors again, like always going back to that, like knowing your roots.
hmm. What was it about living here in Hawaii, aside from your family being here, that you've decided to keep your family here and your roots here versus, going to, you know, California or whatnot to pursue film or video work or even at the time medicine?
Yeah. Um so growing up, I mean, I just love the culture here, right?
Yeah.
Everything about it's so beautiful. The people, the food, I mean, the setting, can't get tired of it. And gratefully grateful and stoked that
Yeah.
growing up I got to travel a lot. So we traveled a lot, and even in my adult life, I love to travel. So that was also on top of my values list, right? I love that
Mm.
family time. I love to travel, and I wouldn't be able to do that as a doctor. So got to travel a lot, got to experience a lot of cultures and places, and that made me realize more that like Hawaii is where I wanted to raise our family.
Yeah.
And so in 2014, when I started Redefined Media, during that part of my life, right after high school, it was like that college phase where I applied to schools, in the mainland and whatnot. And I wanted to go, I wanted to be away from my family and, explore different things. But again, that whole aspect of family kept me home. I wanted to be close to my family. I wanted to be close to my grandparents. Like my grandma was getting old at the time,
Mm.
and I just didn't feel good leaving, and so I stayed back home. Very happy with my decision, and then I was planning on like moving away. Like I wanted to
Yeah.
go LA for a little bit, or New York for like a year or two. Just experience it. Gratefully, like I said, we got to go there and experience it on like a different level. But then when by the time it was like, okay, let's move and whatever, the businesses were kind of blowing up, and I wouldn't have been able to leave the business.
Yeah.
So again, like Redefined Media was my baby at the time, right? 2014 when we started. So we make 10 years this year.
Wow,
2014, I was still in
congratulations.
college, started Redefined Media, and that was starting to snowball and grow. And so by the time I started dating Megan in 2017, I couldn't move. We had the conversation like, oh, let's go to New York for a year, or like let's move here or whatever. It's like, nah, I don't think I can. Like, I can't leave my baby here. I can't
Hmm.
pick up everything, move. I can't even pick this up. Like, I would have to move. Like, if let's say I moved to LA, I'd have to start all over. All the
Yeah.
connections I've made here, the network that I built here, the relationships. Hawaii is all about relationships, right? And I had all those relationships, and I just didn't feel like I could move off island to do it. So
Yeah.
selfishly, career wise, I stayed home because of that. But then also every other aspect is it's hard to leave.
and we all benefited from it because to have you here has made it so much
Thank
better
you.
for us. All of the stories that you've been able to capture for us and share has been invaluable. How did you start Redefine Me? You said you started it in college.
Yeah, so 2014, we were all juniors. It was the four of us at the time. We were just kind of like doing a lot of projects on our own. So in 2011 already, I was already shooting projects freelance. We were all freelancers. I was doing weddings. I reached out to all the wedding companies and like, hey, can I help? So I worked with Aria. I worked with Philip at Supreme. I worked at so many companies. And 2014, we were starting to go into more like commercial storytelling. So like
Hmm.
documentary films, short stories, like more like brand films, and
Yeah.
we were doing it all separately. And then we had a project. Um, it was like a bunch of music videos and whatnot. And one day I was just like, hey, why don't we just start a company? Why don't we just do this? You know, like being young and naive, but like,
Yeah.
let's just start a production company. I went on a trip with my dad to LA. I filmed a project with my dad. It was like a documentary on, it was like a church project out there. And so I did that. And on the flight home, this also sounds crazy. I've shared this story many times, and it's so true because I fall asleep on the plane. I fall asleep everywhere. Any kind of car ride or plane ride puts me to sleep. Fell asleep, but during that sleep, I woke up and I was like, dude, Redefined Media. That's the name, Redefined Media. This is the logo. I kind of sketched it out on like the airplane napkin,
Yeah.
and that was like our first logo. And yeah, we came home and was like, let's just start it, and it's been uh Redefined Media ever since.
What did that name mean to you?
I don't know. I think it was just like at the time we were young,
Uh-huh.
and it was the start of social media
Hmm.
videos. So Vine 6 seconds, Instagram 6 seconds, to 15 seconds to eventually 30, and then what it is now. And we were taking advantage of it. We were like making these short stories, making them really quick, high quality, and it caught on, right? Like a lot of these big brands started to notice. So we kind of like niched down to that. We're like, Redefine Media or whatever we're doing, we're gonna focus in on this digital marketing, this social media. Let's double down on it. It's gonna be a big thing. And thankfully we did. Um, and so I just wanted to kind of like redefine
Mm.
s- people's thinking, right? Because at the
Yeah.
time, everyone's like, social media, we don't need
Yeah.
that. Like,
Yeah.
we got our TV ads, we got our radio ads. Like,
That
why would
newspaper.
we? Yeah, exactly. Why would we pay you to create a 6 second video for us?
Yeah.
I'm like, bro, just wait, just
Yeah.
wait.
And now everyone's like, why would I do TV when I got
Yeah, exactly.
social
I don't even
media?
watch TV.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, can you make us a TV commercial? I'm like, yes, okay, I'm gonna have to do some research because I don't even watch TV.
What do they do these days?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I really wanted that. And then 2014 we operated till 2017, and then two of the partners moved away, and so it was just me and Evan. And we 2019 we hired our first employee, and now we're
Wow.
at one, two, three, four, six employees,
Wow.
including us. And then also in 2018, I was like, I missed the wedding industry so much. I was doing no weddings at the time. I want to just do one wedding a month. So I actually did Redefined Media DBA Redefined Weddings just because I wanted to do weddings still. And then even that, I was so busy I couldn't even handle my emails and everything and whatnot. So Megan was like, "Hey, how can I help?" And I was like, "Oh my god, do you love emails?" She loved emails. She's very type A, very organized, loves timelines and all these things. So she's actually like the COO, studio manager, does everything on the back end now for Redefined Weddings. And that's when we decided to like split it off. So Redefined Media is Evan and I, and then Redefined Weddings is myself and Megan.
Wow.
So we keep it separate. Same name though. It was just easy.
Mhm.
I couldn't really think of anything else. And even then, I wanted to redefine the wedding space. Like there
Yeah.
are so many companies out there, and I don't know. I just love the word redefined. It's just like changing your perspective and just redefining what you think of what you know.
What were what were some of the growing pains? Because we look at it now and you're just like, oh, you. You're
Oh, growing
just
pains.
hitting us. Yeah, but you're like you said, you're like,
So many,
let's just start up a business. It's
so
like
many, so
that
many.
sounds like a terrible idea to me.
Going through this whole process, I realize it's either you win or you learn.
Yeah.
There's really no losing, and like after I heard that, I that changed my perspective on everything. But going back and thinking about, like, we made so many mistakes starting a business. Our first one was taxes. We were
Oh
like,
yeah.
holy moly, we did all of our taxes wrong, and now we owe all these back taxes. So like a few years in, we're like, holy moly, we owe this much money. We got a letter from the IRS saying like, hey,
Oh
you've been filing
scary.
your taxes wrong, blah blah blah. We're like, oh my goodness, learning mistake. Like little things like that, or like 2017 like was like, oh my gosh, the two partners are leaving, like how, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Are we gonna like continue this? At the time we were already working with a lot of contractors. We built a network in like the creative field, but then it was like, oh my gosh, how do we continue? Do we can
Hmm.
we handle the workload? um 2017 we also signed the lease for this studio warehouse space that we're in, and we've been here ever since. And like even that, right, that was like, okay, oh my gosh, now we have an overhead.
Yeah.
Now we have to like do whatever it takes to pay this overhead and then make sure we can live and this is our job, right? And so that forced us to grow. 2019 was our first employee. That was a lot of learning as well. Like how do you, I mean, we've been managing ourselves, we've been managing
Yeah.
contractors, like they come and go, but it's like, okay, now we're responsible for this person's livelihood too. It's not just
Hmm.
us. We're paying this person a salary and they're relying on that salary to live, right? They're
Yeah.
creating, doing what they love, but without the salary they might not be able to have their own families or live and whatnot. So that was like oh my gosh, another moment of reality for us, realization. And we've just been kind of growing ever since. COVID happened, that was a big one,
Yeah.
but thankfully, like I said, everybody has a story. And during COVID, there were a lot of stories, and stories change. So brands change and pivoted. So we pivoted, started creating commercials and films during that time towards that. And I don't know. Yeah. So we kind of just been growing, making mistakes, learning from it. And here we are.
All right, before we go any further, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, High Life Clothing. They make these amazing Aloha shirts and Aloha polos that I wear not only on every episode, but also in every picture and photo you usually see me in on social media. I'm usually wearing one of their shirts. It's because it's my favorite shirt. It's not only great looking as far as the designs go, but the material is so soft, it doesn't have to be ironed. It's comfortable, breathable, and it just fits my body right. So it's easy for me to say that these are my favorite shirts, and they're all from High Life Clothing. And if you want to go and check out these shirts and all the other great stuff that they have, please mahalo our sponsor by going and checking out their website, highlifeclothing.com. And now let's go ahead and get back to our interview. How do you manage employees when you yourself are a creative? Your industry is about creativity. I feel like it adds so many layers to, you know, running a business and handling employees versus like, a convenience store. It's like
Yeah.
everything's
Yeah.
kind of like this is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
set, this is how you
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I go back to this book called The E Myth Revisited a lot every year. Colby was the one that introduced that to me, and basically it's the entrepreneur myth, and a lot of like elements in that book like helped me figure out my identity crisis at the time. So I had that identity crisis from being a doctor to filmmaker. So then I
Mm,
chose filmmaker, but then as I started the business, I was like, I'm actually genuinely more passionate about being a business owner, entrepreneur. I love solving problems. I love thinking higher level and like, figuring out how to make things work. And so during that time, I think it was not until recently, like I would say like 2021, it was like that light bulb went off for me and was like, hey, you're not you're not really passionate about being a filmmaker. Your true passion lies in problem solving, creating like these teams, growing them, um, managing. and solving problems, you know. And so I still do both, but I would say I am a problem solver more often than I am a filmmaker. So you hire for those roles, right? Like they're
Mm.
the talent these days, they're so much more creative than me. They're so much more talented than me. Their film work is amazing. Everything is crazy. But for me, I love being able to put those pieces together, providing whatever resources they need for them to create whatever, you know, they want, and then for them to be stoked and like really proud of their work. That's huge. Like um I think a big reason why I'm so passionate about it is like the feeling of when, you know, someone creates something on your team, they send it to a client, and a client comes back and it's like, hey, this is approved, this is amazing, like you guys crushed it. And I was like, look, you guys did this, you guys did this, you know, like I didn't even do anything. Like I made the connection, maybe like I did a little, I gave some notes, but like you guys made this, you guys did this. And like I was able to provide the resources and the opportunity for people to grow. And I think that's what I love. That's like my era right now, the era I'm
Yeah.
in.
How if you could look through, I mean, your life is still considerably short
Yeah,
because you're so
yeah.
young, but kind of like where do you see like the different transitions of your eras of your life? Like were there significant points where it goes, this needed to happen in order to kind of evolve my, you know, my evolution into this part of my family life or business life or understanding my identity, as you're saying you had your identity crisis.
Yep. So for that most recent one, I guess to kind of answer your previous question was, I found that it was very difficult and there were so many aspects and elements to managing a team. It's
Mm,
tough, you know, like I've had to deal with different employees, you know, their learning styles or their creativity, and um just so many different experiences from that. And like I was like, okay, this requires more of my time than anything else. And if I don't put more time and energy into this, like the team will fail. And if the team fails, then the company fails, and you know, we're not able to pay um these salaries out, and they can't live, you know. So bottom
yeah.
line is like, yo, we got to do something, or we're not going to be able to provide for their livelihoods. And that was like kind of a big motivator. And so I was like, okay, something's got to change. um how do I make that change and make it work? And then also like breaking it down to time.
Hmm.
How do I have more time? How do I give myself back more time? So hiring for a lot of these roles that I used to do, I used to just be editing all the time or filming all the time or like in front of the computer all the time. I still am. uh, you know, own a business, they said. Start a business. It's fun. Um, but yeah, no, I think I'm just so passionate about it. And like, I would rather do whatever it takes to make sure the teams are all set, or like the work is done, or the companies are successful. But then also keeping in mind that like time is valuable. So that balance. So that's when I kind of realized, okay, I need to make that shift a little bit. I gotta
Mm,
let go. That's a big one. That was a hard one for
yeah.
me. Because in the creative industry, right? Like I can do it. I should be the one editing this.
Yeah.
I should be the one touching the camera and filming this shot, because like I can do it. This is my creativity. This is my control. I have that control. But then once I was able to just kind of like flip that switch and was like, you know what? I I trust him. I trust him. He can do it. Or like I'm gonna hire that person because they are more efficient at editing than me, or they are just way better at editing than me. And once like you got past that, like that really was like that exponential growth. Being able to let
Yeah.
go and trusting.
Oh
That's
man.
tough though, especially for a creative.
Exactly. I was gonna
Yeah.
say that's a lot easier said than done, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because like you said, you know, I mean, I'm sure every other job and industry is different. But whenever someone talks about like our industry, like I talk to other entrepreneurs, I'm like, no, it's different, guys. It's different.
Yeah.
Like you're dealing with like creativity now, you know, which is like almost like subjective.
Yeah.
It's like you
Yeah.
can't
How
say
do
it's
you
good or bad. Yeah.
yeah. How do you get
Versus like,
over that? A lot of people in the creative fields, we are very sensitive. Like I've talked to award-winning performers and they have all the accolades, yet when they put out, you know, a new song or something, they're worried, oh, does this suck? And it's like you have all of the proof in the world that you don't do bad work, but yet we still have these doubts. How do you, juggle that? I guess the
I feel
anxiety.
it. I feel it all the time. I get anxious
Yeah.
about it all the time. Um, I think especially with like social media too, like just how easy it is you can compare yourself to others. That's like
Yeah.
always the issue for me. I've gotten better at that, but I always get anxious about that. Just like creating, like, oh, is this good enough? Is this gonna be good and whatnot? But it's like at the end of the day, and okay, another thing about these podcasts that we do,
Hmm.
we come out of those podcasts feeling like so energized and like inspired because of what they share too, right? Like I'm there, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing, like I can't believe you're sharing this, and like I love that you're sharing it, and so like that feeling too is like why we do the podcast. But I feel that way a lot about these. So a bunch of the guests, like we talk about again being able to let go of those feelings and
Hmm.
just being able to create and be authentic to yourself, and
Yeah.
and not falling into that trap of like, oh my gosh, so and so is doing this, or they created this, like should I be doing that, or
Hmm.
should, like, is my video good enough, like should I
Yeah.
post this video? It's like, nah, just do it, do you, and like be authentic, and people are going to gravitate towards that. It's the internet, it's the world, there's billions of people, you can't please every single person. So you're going to have those people that love your work. You're going to have those people that hate your work, and you're going to have those people that don't even care. So
Yeah.
it's like, just put your work out there. Be yourself, be authentic, and you're going to get those people, that really gravitate and care towards you.
Do you have an experience that still kind of maybe not haunts you, but it still has a little sting to you, where in your career where you're like, oof, that was a very painful learning experience.
Oh, that's a good question. I think it was like one of like the early award shows.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's like, you're so proud and of this piece of work that you've done, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like send this in, and it's gonna be like the greatest thing ever. We're gonna win, like just all those
Yeah.
positive thoughts. Then you go in and it's like, wow, we didn't win. And then that kind of like brings you back down to earth a little bit, and it's like it stings, it hurts, but then you just learn from it. You grow from it, take that experience, and see where it goes. So I think, yeah, definitely those moments. I think losing our first, not losing our first employee, but like after our first employee left,
Oh.
I learned a lot from that, just from like management, from the management level, the leadership skills, the um, learned a lot from that. It definitely was almost like, oh man, am I good enough? Like, should I be
Oh.
doing this? Should we be hiring a team? Um, but then that all got in my head, and it's just like, dang, should we even be just, should we hire employees? Should we just work with contractors? Like, what are we doing? Like,
Right.
why are we doing this? And so like that was like a big moment of like snap out of it.
How
It
did you
was
get out over that?
I mean, I definitely talked to a lot of people. Megan has always been like, I don't know. There's always like, your partner is so important and so key, and I love that Megan and I can kind of talk about anything, and that's why I love her so much, and we can be transparent, and she's, because then in this day and age with social media and everything, like like you go out and like just like what you're saying, right? Like, oh my gosh, Andrew, like you're doing all of this stuff, like so cool. I go home and Megan's like, yo, you got to do your dishes,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like hey, like um you shouldn't have done this. Like
Yeah.
she's not afraid to be transparent and like real with me,
Hmm.
which always brings me back down to earth and whatnot. So just talking with her, and like, because I had like big imposter syndrome, I was like,
Yeah.
man, like maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Like maybe I should just switch back to being a filmmaker. I should just like do the work, like just do the work, like I shouldn't be hiring and whatnot. And she's like, you should learn from this. It's just like talking through like the different scenarios and whatnot. That really helped. Talking with a lot of people, sharing my um scenarios, my situations, and like just hearing from that and learning, taking everybody's perspective with a grain of salt, and taking it and analyzing it and snapping out of it. I think the big one was like, hey, stop being a little baby, like snap out of it, learn, and just move forward. If this is what you really want, like make it happen.
when people say, "Hey, just stop being a baby, snap out of it," like it's so easy to
Yeah,
say that, but when you hear that, what actually happens to make you snap out of it? Because I know when I'm in my feelings, I can tell myself like,
yeah,
"Get over this. Like this is not a big deal." But if I feel what I feel, I can't help it. So
exactly. I'm a
what
very
is yeah
emotional person too.
yeah
Megan's not as emotional as me, so that's why it's good. But like, yeah, for me, like I get emotional and like I create like stories or like I'm super emotionally attached to things.
mm-hmm
And so yeah, like I'm trying to think. So like yeah, when I'm in my feelings, I just remind myself my why.
uh
Um and yes, it's important to express your feelings. So yes,
mhm,
I give myself a time limit, right? I'm like, all right,
mm,
spend the day in your feels, do your thing, let it all out, but just know that like after tonight, tomorrow morning, you're back in it. Remember your why, remember why you're doing this, um, and like figure it out, right? Like again,
yeah
like I love to solve problems. And so it's like I think
mm,
growing up too, right? Like as with my parents and things like when things came up, they would just figure it out. They were just
yeah
like, how can we solve this problem? And like that's I've always just grown had that in me. So
yeah
give myself a time limit for sure. Like it's 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 very unhealthy to bottle up your feelings. So
right
definitely express your feelings, mental health, and then but give yourself a time limit to like get out of it. But yeah, I always go back to my why, and my why's change every so often.
mm,
Um, my why has changed now because like now I have a daughter. Like she's my why.
yeah
Before that it was like kind of like more general, like my family, like Megan, and I want to like retire my parents. Like that's still the goal. But now it's like okay, Emery has so much life ahead of her. How can I? What do I need to do to make sure she's good?
yeah
Just
that
reminding yourself of your why and being clear.
when you got the news and we're starting to plan for your daughter to come into your life, what was the one thing that you tried your best to prepare for, but now that you're in it, go, oh, there was no way I could have prepared for that.
Yeah. I found out on the first Saturday of the year. I was heading to a wedding, or like I had a wedding that day, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I want to sleep in on the weekends. Uh, but yeah, I think after we heard the good news, it was kind of just more so like, how do we navigate our lives in a way that will inspire Emery to, I don't know, it's just crazy because like childhood trauma is a real thing,
Hmm.
and what we grew up with, like we're instilled with. So it's like kind of like the okay, I'm still preparing for it because I think she's at such a young age where like you don't have to instill or like teach lessons or anything yet.
Right.
Obviously she's like learning from visually and observing, but like it's like preparing myself like okay, what do I need to change in my life to make sure that I'm ready for her to be the best dad that I can be. And so little things like, I don't know, again, like I keep going back to my childhood traumas
Yeah.
because yes, I had a good childhood, but like there are a lot of things like religion was a big one. We grew up Catholic, so Vietnamese Catholic, very intense. Whoever's listening, if you're Vietnamese Catholic with immigrant parents, being
Is
the
it?
eldest son in the house, lots of expectations. So
Mm,
just dealing with that, and getting over that. So I think that's something that it's not so much like the raising the baby or whatnot, but it's more so the figuring out how to deal with what you're going through before you
yeah.
can like be the best version of yourself for this future generation, right? So I didn't anticipate it being this hard. I think if anything, like that's like the biggest thing I'm going through right now. Again, like
Hmm.
this is like peeling back all the layers, right? I don't really talk about this too often, but it's like that's where I'm at in my life, where it's like that balance, right? Like yes, you had the family that you came from, but then now you have your own family unit, and it's how do you navigate that, right? Like you don't want to disrespect your parents, obviously, but also they have to be understanding that hey, you have your own family now too, and like
Hmm.
things are going to be different, and it's not going to be the same as freaking like the nine, you know, like 1993 till now. So I don't know. It's that like I didn't think it would be this difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big people pleaser. I'm very emotional and like I just want everyone to be happy.
Oh
I just want
man.
everyone to be stoked. So it's like what can I do for you to make you
Yeah.
happy? But what can I do for you to make you happy? But then how do you two be happy with each other, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like I'm dealing with that in another business right now too, and like I don't know, it is I'm that person. I just care so much, and I just don't want anyone to not feel good about anything. So,
Yeah.
but then I think that's another realization I have. Right, it's like s- something has to give.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You and I are like kindred spirit.
yeah,
Everything you're saying, it's like
yeah,
I'm looking
yeah,
in a
yeah,
mirror.
yeah, yeah,
And one thing that I've learned, not especially
yeah.
now
Like,
that I know how much older I am than you, I've had more time.
uh-huh.
But um, the the scary and hardest lesson I had to learn was as a people pleaser is
Yep.
I'm not going to be that effective until I'm able to know how to please myself, or at least know that I got to take care of me first and deal with my
Yes.
own stuff first before I can. Because what I
Yes.
think I did was I distracted myself from looking within to say, well, but I got to take care of all these other people first. Like, I don't have time for myself.
Yes.
And all that did was just bury the
Yep.
problems more, which made them more pressure and came out
Yeah.
in ways that I didn't want or expect. And then I
That's
think,
crazy you say that
yeah,
because
yeah,
I literally just had a conversation with Megan like a few weeks ago about that because it's like my favorite line, like my go-to line is like it's all good, like as long as you're good,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm good, don't worry about me, I'm
yeah.
good, I'm good. Let's just do it, you know.
Hmm.
To anyone, like I'm good,
Yeah,
don't worry about me, like let's just figure it out. And yeah, definitely, you know, you don't think that you're bottling feelings, obviously you are, but it's like it's gonna pile up and you keep bearing it down, and like one day that pressure is gonna build up and just like blow, and it's gonna be something you don't want to do. So I'm trying to alleviate that, I'm trying to prevent that.
yeah,
And yeah, just like I think like even just today, like just this, like again, like I said, I don't talk about this, so this was a good way of me letting it out a little bit. So thank you for giving me this platform, and you know,
no, thank you
whatnot,
for
but
sharing, man. Like I said, I feel like I'm
yeah,
looking in the mirror as
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah,
talking.
yeah. And like that's why like I think it's such a relatable topic.
Hmm.
But you know, the generations are different, right? Like this day and age, it's very okay to share your feelings and
Yeah.
express yourself, and like mental health is so important. Growing up, none of these things were like what,
Hmm.
like yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, this is
Something's
not
wrong
a
with you
thing.
if you say if you talk out
Exactly.
loud about these things.
Like what? Like really, like no, just suck it up. Like do your
Yeah,
thing, figure it out, figure it out. You got this. You stop being a baby. But now
yeah,
it's like oh, okay, there's a reason to it, and like okay, now we're like micro analyzing everything, and feelings matter.
yeah. And we, like you said, we're in a different environment too. I
We are,
mean,
yep,
with social media and the way that we ingest information is completely different from the 90s for you, the 80s
yeah,
for me, the
yeah,
70s for those before
yeah,
us. And one thing that I had to really learn when because I became a an instant parent when I married Jamie, and I became a stepdad to
yeah,
her two boys, is I used to always have this mentality early on of, hey, I had to suffer through this. Like,
yeah,
you got to do it too. And then
yeah,
one day I was just like, well, did I enjoy suffering? And like, is it still bothering me to this day? Yeah, it was pretty traumatic. And I think my life now would be much better if I hadn't gone through those childhood traumas, like you
yeah,
mentioned.
yeah,
So I was like, so why am I gonna put these kids through that trauma? It's only just gonna make them feel like how I'm feeling right now, which is, you know,
yeah,
confused and
yeah, yeah,
terrible. So
yeah,
yeah, it's so hard to change that mindset of like, hey, I went through this, you gotta deal with it too. It's like,
100%.
actually, you
I
shouldn't. You shouldn't
Yeah,
deal with that.
yeah, yeah. Me, you know what? Maybe not.
Yeah,
And that's you realizing, right? Like going back to what you're saying, like realizing that, like, hey, you know, we gotta dig deep within, and figure out how to take care of ourselves before we can take care
yeah,
of other people. Um, yeah, we've heard that in a lot of episodes too,
oh
and
yeah,
like it's just like you gotta love yourself first before you can love others, you know, because you want to be the best version of yourself, or else it's like you know it's not as valuable as you could be. You're not being the best
Hmm.
version of yourself. So yeah, no, I really resonate with that. So yeah, that's what I'm currently working on. That's like the other side of the current era I'm in.
Hmm. Yeah.
The personal.
Yeah. It and I've noticed too, especially with a lot of the clips from your podcast, that there is a huge emphasis on these lessons and hearing, through other people's life experiences and such, these um, lessons and values that kind of really resonate on a deep level. Was
Yeah.
that always the uh, what you envisioned this podcast to look like when you first thought of it, or did
No,
it kind of become this?
it kind of became that. So
Yeah.
when we first started, it was like, we're still the podcast where we talk to creators, entrepreneurs, and change makers.
Hmm.
And when we first started that, we were like, okay, let's share stories of how these people started their businesses and how they overcame it. Obviously it wasn't win-win-win all the time. Like, let's talk
Yeah.
about some of those learning lessons. And then from there, like again, like, every story has levels. As we're like going deeper, 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 you figure out like, holy crap, like there was something, I don't know, traumatic that happened,
Yeah.
or some valuable lesson that they learned that like changed their mindset or changed their lives and how they operate, and that's why the business is the way it is, right? So
Hmm.
it just kept getting deeper, and like, and then we would like almost strive for, like, for that now. And it's like, we go into these podcasts with no plan. I mean, not necessarily no plan, but like we do our research and we know like surface level, but like
Hmm.
our goal is to kind of just like go with the flow. And I think that's what makes Kobe and I like great interviewers, is when we're doing it for clients, like we're so present and we're able to like come up with questions
Yeah.
and kind of like play off the conversation and kind of dig deeper. And so that's why with like the podcast, we were like, okay, yeah, I think we can keep going. Let's how can
Hmm.
we dig deeper at a comfortable level? And we always hear it like being able to provide that like safe space for people to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think another big one, I talked to Kamaka Diaz about it on the Keep It Aloha pod, and like he was saying too, like I think it's like guests are afraid to be vulnerable,
Hmm.
and I think that's why some guests like don't take the opportunity to be on podcasts, or they don't do
Yeah.
these things because it's like somewhere in them there's a fear to be vulnerable. And like, yeah,
Yeah.
these podcasts are, it's like we're creating this comfortable space, and let's talk about whatever. And sometimes you might get vulnerable, there's crying sometimes, or like, you might realize something that you didn't realize before. Like,
Yeah.
I there's so many things I talked to today, like I don't really talk to anyone. And so, you just feel safe, and like being like, these platforms are great, and I think that's why we love it.
Do you feel like this is a pathway for us as a society and a community to kind of, it feels like to me, prior to the pandemic, I think we were really starting to have a lot of division, and then the pandemic kind of exasperated that.
Yeah.
But for me, it feels like, as I see a lot of these platforms like your podcast and such, it just seems like there's a huge push for bringing people together in ways that where we can relate with each other, where we can just be real and honest with each other. Are you seeing that as kind of your vision for what you and Kobe are doing, is like part of making these, I guess, pathways for bringing more connection and positivity within our community and our state?
Yeah, 100%. I 100% agree, or like with that, because it's like, yes, we are trying to create this community, right? Collaboration over competition.
Mm,
Even
yeah.
with like the OWA and everything we're doing, is like we want to build this community, because like that's a beautiful thing about the culture in Hawaii. It's like, there's so much aloha everywhere, and
Yeah.
it's like, how do we bring that to the world, and how do we share stories of almost like the unsung heroes too? It's like,
Hmm.
we don't care to talk to like celebrities. Like, yes, that'd be awesome, but it's like I'd rather talk to like uncle up the street that's like doing something that's like
Yeah.
affecting the community, that like he doesn't really like have any um any recognition for anything, but doesn't even want it. But it's like just sharing that story might inspire someone else from another street to do something, or
Yeah.
like that. That's why I think these stories are so great. And like when we first started, even now, like we don't get a lot of like listeners and whatnot, but we still continue to do it because it's like that small community that we have, something that they listen to might change their lives. And I think
Yeah.
that's what drives us to continue it.
Mhm.
Because yeah, there were some challenging moments. It's hard. Kobe and I are busy. We both have crazy schedules. Kobe's a mom of two. She lives on the
Yeah.
Big Island. She flies in every time for episodes. And I have a young family, and we have the businesses to operate and whatnot. So it's like there are times where like, oh my gosh, should we continue this? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
But it's like at the end of the day, it's like again reminding ourselves of the why.
Mhm.
It's like, why are we doing this? It's like we want to share these stories because it's like, even if it like one person hears that story and it changes their lives and it motivates them to do something, or like gets them out of like this funk that they were in, that's like worth it.
Yeah. I agree. I've been through similar
Yeah.
situations where
Yeah.
with
So
my previous podcast, like there was many moments where I was like, I think I'm done doing this. There's
yeah.
no reason
Yeah.
for me to do it. And I had one more to record. And after that interview, it's just like, how could I ever think to
Yeah.
stop this?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we got to keep doing this. This is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Like these
Yeah.
people need to be have their stories shared. People need to hear
Yeah.
about this.
Uh-huh.
So yeah. I love what you said to camaraderie over competition, because that is such a foreign concept to, I think, the younger or the
Uh-huh.
older generation.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's why things are going so are growing right now, because we're seeing the value in that in camaraderie. Yeah.
100%. My word for 20, so every year I have a word. My word for 2022 was elevate. So I think that's why
Mhm.
when I joined OJBA, I was like, hey, we need to elevate this industry. And how do we do that, right? Community, camaraderie, collaboration, all over competition. Because I feel like, yeah, I mean, back then, it was very like Hawaii was never like as cutthroat as like other industries, but there was still a sense of like, hey, like this is my thing, I don't want to share. But like as if we want to grow and elevate the industry, we have to grow together. And so what
Mhm.
does that look like, right? Everybody collaborating with each other, everybody helping. Like you have an issue that like another person might have already dealt with and can kind of like help you through that. Or
Yeah.
you have like uh I don't know, some kind of connection that might help another person. So it's like that's just gonna grow the industry. And so yeah, I still truly believe in that. Tessa has been an amazing president, and working with her to elevate the wedding industry and again just grow the community, that's been huge.
Yeah. And Andrew, I could talk to you for another 2 hours,
Oh
but
yes,
I
yeah.
promised you we would keep it this long. So I know you're so busy too. So I really appreciate you carving out this time to do this. And like I said in the beginning, I was looking forward to this for so long. So I'm so grateful that we finally got to sit down and do
No, thank you,
this.
Nolan. I see you at all like the events and the and whatnot. And like I think another beautiful thing about this is like, we connect on a different level in person, right? Let's like quick catch up, whatnot. But
Yeah.
like to be able to sit down for like an hour, no phones, that's a big
Yeah.
one, like being present in the conversation, that's huge. And so again, thank you for having me. I mean, I'm super grateful and for the opportunity, and thank you for having this platform to share all these stories as well.
Appreciate it. So before I let you go, how
Yeah.
can people get involved or connected with you and all of the different things that you have going on?
100%. So I keep saying 100%. Why do I keep
Yeah.
saying that? Uh,
When you're
I
saying
just
that you gotta say stoked and grateful, I was like,
I know
I only hear
now
100%.
yeah, now I'm noticing that about me too. When we listen to our podcast, we like to say yeah. And now I keep saying 100%. Anyways, to find me, reach out to me on my personal Instagram _ Andrew Tran. Email me Andrew at redefined.media. Or yeah, just reach out on the website, email the teams, and there will be a connection back to me. So feel free to reach out. I'm always willing to help. And I always tell people, I wouldn't be here who I am and where I'm at today without the help of mentors and other people in the industry before me. So I want to do the same for the next generation and give back whatever I can. So please, if you have any questions about business, creative, anything, reach out.
See, and what I love about that is I know you mean it. Like people will say that
Uh,
because they know that's the right thing to say, but
yeah.
through what I've seen with you proving through your actions that you totally mean that. And especially hearing your story here today, like I feel like I know like this is who you are. So yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
awesome. Thanks for being that to our community and wanting to help in that way.
Yes. I mean, I really owe it to the community. So I want to give back as much as I can. So thank you again.
All right. So next time I have you on, it'll be after you talk with your grandfather. So you have to
Yes, I
get
think
those
so.
stories and
I know. We should just do a
share.
podcast together about that.
Yeah, that'd be
Thank you.
awesome.